Welcome to Resilience+RISE, the podcast where resilience is not just a concept, but a lived experience. I'm your host, Thomas Carrier, a resilience and accountability coach, an ultramarathoner, and a relentless believer in the human spirit's ability to rise. This podcast is a companion to my book, Resilience+RISE 26.2 Transform to Miles to Unleash Your Marathon of Life's Mindset. Each episode of this podcast is raw, it's unfiltered, and it's a dive into the stories of those who have faced life's hardest battles and emerged stronger. Today's guest, Lisa Zarcone. I've had the privilege of having a talk with Lisa a few months back. And I was mentioning to her, there are few personalities who have come onto my podcast and they have created such a beautiful sense of being, a sense of authenticity, a sense of humanness. And as I mentioned before, resilience is not just a concept, but a lived experience. Her part of being raw and unfiltered, dive into the stories, facing life's hardest battles. She is a walking example of that. Lisa is a public speaker. She's an advocate of child and mental health. She's a social media influencer. She's got two books, The Unspoken Truth and The Book of Joanne. She's a voice for the voiceless, advocating for awareness, education, change, and above all, healing. So, without talking further, Lisa, welcome to Resilience+RISE, the podcast.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that beautiful introduction, Thomas. Oh my goodness. Thank you.
So for the people who know you, they know a little of your story, but I know there are a lot of us who are still wanting to know. So, what's the story and how have you reached over here?
Oh, the story. You know, I've been through a lot. I've been through a lot. And when you go back to the beginning, when you talk about the story, the unspoken truth, I wrote my own memoir, and it just speaks to what I've been through with child abuse and neglect and sexual abuse and all these awful things that happened in my life. I mean, loss, abandonment. I mean, it just goes on and on. It was so many things. It just wasn't one piece. It was many, many things that, came together in my life that really brought me to dark places and deep struggles. And writing my personal memoir was huge for me because this was a big piece of breaking the silence of all that happened to me, validating every single piece of it. And when you speak of that word raw and authentic, that's exactly how I wrote my story. I wrote it differently. I wrote it through the eyes of a child, giving the child's perspective of abuse, talking also about resilience and faith and hope, because even though my story brought me to very, very dark places as I was writing it and it was unfolding, I also added in those moments when I had such deep courage and faith and strength to keep going, to keep moving forward, to fight for myself, fight for my freedom, fight for my sanity, because so much again was happening. I was beaten down to the lowest of the low, and it was just such a hard journey. But writing it, putting it out there, sharing it with the world has just been such a moving and powerful experience for me. And I have just evolved on so many levels. When we talk about the healing journey, we can do that in a bit and talk more about that. But the healing process just gave me higher levels of feeling whole, coming into my womanhood on new levels and experiences, all of those things that brought me to the right here and now. So sharing my story wasn't the end. It was the beginning. It was the beginning of a whole new chapter and journey for me to do what I do now.
So you mentioned, thank you for that. You mentioned about healing. You mentioned about stories. So if you're allowed to talk about the wounds before the healing, the wounds are there. What were the hurting? Because what I just heard was there was something which was very wrong. There was something which you have gone through. When you look back, it was hurtful. If I could ask, what were those points of your life wherein you felt what's happening?
Yes. So I mean, when I think back to the beginning, to when I was very, very young, my family unit, my parents, myself, my brother, and my mother at that time was beginning to struggle with her mental health issues. And as young children, my brother and I were very aware. It's amazing how children are so aware of their surroundings and so aware of when things aren't quite right. You feel it in your bones, you feel it in your soul. My brother and I both felt it. And he was my protector. He protected me and shielded me from a lot of the things that were happening in our home that were unsafe and unstable. And he passed
What
away.
was your age? Sorry, at that
I'm
time.
sorry. No, at that time, I was probably like 3. Him,
Oh,
5.
okay.
We were young, really, really like tapping into what was happening with my mother and the instabilities. And as time went on, and my brother, passed away of leukemia. I was lost. I lost my best friend. I lost my protector. I lost my everything. And I was devastated. So at a young age of 6, I'm dealing with loss. I'm dealing with a broken family. I'm dealing with my mom's struggle with mental illness. And I'm dealing with silence because nobody talked about anything. Everything was silent. And I was just a very confused little girl who just couldn't grasp what was really happening. And there was nobody there to shelter me from the storms that were coming. And those storms, those storms were my mother. My mother's mental illness progressed, and she became very, very sick, very deep into, being mentally ill. And I was left there alone with her to try to survive the madness, to try to survive it all. And the abuse was extensive. It was emotional, it was mental, it was physical. And she also brought many unsafe people into our home. And I was preyed upon by others who were struggling with mental illness just like her. And I was preyed upon to the point where I was sexually abused. So now, on top of everything else that I was dealing with, and mind you, this was years. This wasn't like it happened in a very short period of time and it was over. This went on for years, years upon years, right on into my, young adulthood. So I was struggling with all of these things for a very long time. And it did bring me to the depths of, excuse me, wanting to die. And I hate to say that out loud, just bluntly, but that is the reality, is that I did. I wanted to die. I did not want to be on this earth anymore. And I was 13 years old. And that is just such a sad thing to say, but just so honest, because I was beaten down to a point where I just felt like I couldn't go another step. I couldn't move forward. And I just wanted peace and I wanted safety. And in my mind, that was the only way that it was going to come. But by the grace of God and by the grace of spirit, as I put it, as always, my brother in spirit, I heard him speak to me and say, no, this isn't the answer, because I had a plan. I had a plan of suicide, and I was going to, play it out on this very day. And I clearly heard my brother's voice saying to me, no, stop. This is not the answer. And I felt so emotional and so shocked to hear his voice and to feel him so deeply around me that it did stop me from doing what I had planned to do. And it did change my thought process. So moving forward from this day, I did still have thoughts of wanting to die, but every time they crept into my head, I kept hearing my brother, like he was tapping me on the shoulder, like, nope, you're not going there. You got to keep fighting. You got to keep pushing. And that is where your internal strength comes in, your courage, your faith, all of those things inside of you, that deep resilience that comes in and says, no matter what you throw at me, I'm going to throw it back. And I'm going to push harder and I'm going to fight harder. And I'm going to do everything in my power to get through this. And I am going to live a good life someday, a life that I deserve, a life that I want. And those were the things that were inside of my head as I went through many, many changes. Of course, it didn't happen overnight. I was young. I was a teenager. I was angry. We went through that whole phase. I did dabble with drugs and alcohol for a little bit to try to suppress the pain and the memories. But, that was short lived for me because I realized like that wasn't the answer either. What were the real answers? And it went right back to resilience and faith and courage to push forward. And I did that. And I pushed on through right onto adulthood. And it was a very, very difficult journey to get there. But I just kept my eyes forward, my thoughts forward, and I just kept on moving.
Wow. Sorry that I asked you to reopen some of the wounds. But as they say, is that every lesson that we learn helps another human in understanding on how to overcome. And now that you are a strong advocate for child and mental health, how has this transformation taken place?
Yes, that transformation has come from healing. That transformation has come from hitting level after level, working really hard on myself to finally put these things to rest. And I always use this term, I say it a million times, I called it taming the beast. I named it taming the
Okay.
beast because my pain and my trauma was a beast. And it took me a long time to work through it. But the more I worked through it, the stronger I became. And then that pushed me to this next level to abdicate, to step into that light, to be like, okay, I did write my story. I did put it out there. Now what am I going to do with it? It doesn't end there. This is where we really have to look at the bigger picture. I've been through horrific things. I'm not the only person in the world who's been through horrific things. There's countless, countless people. Everyone has a story, and everyone's story is unique and special. And by sharing my stories, by abdicating the way I do, it's letting people know that they're not alone in their struggles. They're not walking a path alone anymore because they're hearing from other people like myself, who are saying, hey, I went through this too. We can walk forward together. We can heal. We can find goodness in our lives. And we have to remind ourselves that we are worthy of those good things. And I think that's something that many people who have been through trauma and abuse lose sight of, and I lost sight of that myself, is that we feel we're not worthy of these good things in life. But when we do that switch of the mindset and remind ourselves over and over again, we are worthy. We're worthy of healing. We're worthy of happiness. We're worthy of goodness. We're worthy of all of those things that life has to offer. And we have to work towards it. Crawl, walk, run, however it is, but we got to just keep moving forward, and we can do that together by sharing our stories and abdicating.
But here again, I see from another point is that few of the people who are in the struggle process, sometimes mentally, emotionally, you're not just in the space even to have the strength to switch the light or the button on.
Mm,
What would you tell to them? That it's easy to say, get up
yes.
and be strong. But when you're in that depth and there's only darkness around, how do you hold on to that faith? How do you hold on to that it is possible,
Right.
that there is another world that I'm capable of? What would you say on that?
For somebody who is deeply, deeply struggling and they feel like there's no hope left, they can't move another step. Again, I was there. I've felt that way. I would say to them, take it minute by minute. Look at what you're going through, and don't don't go at it at a whole. Take it small, tiny pieces at a time, and really look at each piece slowly, and remind yourself that it's okay to crawl. It's okay to do this in tiny, tiny steps. And it's okay to take breaks. But also, never lose your hope and faith, because there is always a way. Even when we feel like there isn't, we can find solutions. We can find help. And the other thing I would also say to someone who has hit that point where they feel like they just can't, I would say to them, reach out for help and support. It's okay to ask for that, and tap into every bit of support you can possibly find and use to help yourself get to that next step. And when you do get to that next step, which you will, and it's hard, it's painstakingly hard at times. But when you get to that next step, stop for a moment and celebrate. Celebrate every small victory, because every step forward is a victory. It's just on your own pace, on your own time. We all get there in our own time frame. But always look forward, always reach for help, and never ever give up, because there is a way.
At times when I'm talking to a lot of amazing humans and they say that there is a way, but also I've spoken to people who just refuses to believe that there is a way. All they know is, and okay, it's not about just being the victim and the martyr.
Mhm.
And there are some people who like to wallow in that particular thing, and they prefer being in that because that's how they get the pat on the back saying that, okay, oh, poor you. But there are people somewhere in the depths, in the crevices of their emotional being, they want to also move around. So, Lisa, what I've heard is that have the faith and ask, search around. There is always somebody who would be able to help you or take that small next minute or the next step, and that works on to the next and the next and the next.
And you keep on going. It's not an easy journey. I'm sorry. I just have to say that it's just
Yeah,
not an easy journey. It's a difficult journey, but it's one worth taking.
the journey you have vividly put it out across in your books. You have given us as a raw, authentic truth, whether it's about your own unspoken truth, the silences, or it's a story about your mother. What can you what can you tell about that? These books. And guys, also I'll be putting out Lisa's website and the connections down in the comments below. To have a look. If you have reached until here and there is some resonance, there's some feeling that if you or somebody else needs any support, reach out to her. She may not have all the answer, or she may have, but she could direct you to some people who could help you further on to the next step and on to the next one. So,
Yeah,
Lisa, how about your books?
my books. So starting again with the Unspoken Truth, my personal memoir, raw, profound, possibly triggering to some people. I always give a trigger warning if you decide to read my story. It is in the rawest form. You are reading it from the child's perspective, the child's pain. And it is a hard read. It's not an easy read, but I did that purposely. I want people to understand what the child goes through, what really does happen behind closed doors. And I always knew I would write my story. I would share it for purpose and awareness. I want people to really know, really know what the child is feeling and thinking. And that is how I wrote that story. And it was hard to write it from that way, because I had to really tap into my inner child that was still in so much pain. I was working on my own healing journey at the time of writing this story. So it was difficult for me. I had to take many breaks. I had to step away from it, but I always knew I'd finish it and I would put it out there. And it's interesting going through life with a mom with such deep mental illness. It really taught me many things. It taught me real about awareness, always being aware of your surroundings, because I always had to be aware of my surroundings because I never knew what my mother was going to do next. My mother cycled so continually and frequently that I always had felt like I was behind the eight ball trying to keep up with her because she was just highs to the highs, lows to the lows. But it did teach me how to be resilient. It taught me how to always be aware of my surroundings. It also taught me how to switch hats, as I call it, quickly and fast paced because I had to keep up with what was happening in my world of dysfunction. And my mom and I have had a lot of conversation about, my story, her story. And she always said to me, Lisa, I know you're going to put your story out there. She says, but please share my story. I want my story to be told. I want people to understand what happens to somebody who struggles with mental illness. My mother was a very, very sick woman, but she had these moments of clarity to where it's like I'm speaking to this person and I'm like, wow, deep, spiritual, powerful. We'd have these moments of conversation and she would be very spot on about life, about her journey, about her illness, about how it affected me and our family. And she always said, write my story, Lisa. It needs to be told. It's important. And I promised her that I would do so. And she, of course, shared many, many things with me about her own life and her upbringing. And when I decided that I was ready to write her story, again, that was another different journey for me because I was tapping into my mom. And this is a story from birth to death, everything in between, our relationship as mother and daughter, all the complexity of all of that. Like it's just a big, big story. And along the way, I learned so much about my mother. I looked through her lenses. I looked at her perspective of life from a young child on up to a married woman, a mom, a grandmother, trying to survive this illness that just robbed her of everything. My mother was a young woman who had hopes, wishes, and dreams just like anybody else. She didn't choose to be ill. And that's a huge misconception that many people have about mental illness and mental health. Nobody wakes up one day and says, yes, I would love to be mentally ill and take this struggle. No, it's generational. It's, situational. I mean, you can go through trauma and abuse, war, battles, all those things that PTSD brings on. It can bring on different forms of mental illness. Nobody chooses it. And, she wanted people to understand that her journey and struggles were very, very deep, and they certainly were. And I learned a lot about my mom. I learned a lot about her intelligence, her beauty, her drive to be a wife, a mother. She was a hairdresser. She was so talented. And she never showed her intelligence like, you would think, like when you had those moments with her, she was such a highly intelligent woman and she's tenacious and definitely spirited in a way of like, it's going to be her way. That's it. She was very tough. But I learned so many wonderful things about her. And I realized that I have a lot of those same qualities as her. And I fought that for years because of my pain, because of, fighting my mother's battles with her and against her and all of that, because I was her advocate going through the process of life. And it was hard to see the good pieces when you were always getting the bad pieces. But writing her story showed me the good pieces, and it gave me another huge level of healing and understanding of why everything fell apart, but also why she was my mother. She was my mother for a reason.
There is who I was listening to the other day, Louise Hay, wherein she mentions if you believe in the higher power, when the children are sent to the earth, they choose at times their parents to go through some of the experiences which they would not realize were in that spirit world.
I love that because I'm a firm believer in the spirit world, and I feel I'm a very inspirational person, a very spirited person. I do believe that we're all connected for reasons. And when I think back to my life, my story, my brother only being here 9 years, but our connection is a lifetime. Like we had such a powerful connection together as brother and sister. And moving that on to with my parents and our journey, and we all had these things that happened. I think they all happened for reasons. I would not be here today doing what I do right now if I did not go through these things. Do I ever wish these awful things on anybody? Absolutely not. Nobody wants to go through horrendous trauma and abuse. And my story is brutal. But again, I wouldn't be here doing what I do now and helping others if I didn't experience those things. And I do believe, firmly believe, that my parents and my brother, our family unit, was meant to be as it was, as it fell apart, as we all had to move forward in our own ways. And now, in this stage of my life, I'm the only one left here on this earth. My mom is gone, my dad is gone, my brother is gone, and they're together. And I'm here. I feel connected to each and every one of them, but it's a different world. And I'm here for purpose. I'm here for this purpose to help others. And hopefully, I always hope that by speaking and doing what I do, that other people can get to the point of healing in a way that I've healed. Because I feel so emotionally blessed to be able to get to this point, because I was so incredibly broken that one would think that I would never be able to heal on the magnitude that I have. And that's always my hope for other people, to get to a point where I am, hopefully, or somewhere close, that they can feel the fullness of life once again.
Our brokenness, I always say that we all are like angels with a broken wing. It's only when we hold another, that's when we fly higher.
And this is true. I agree wholeheartedly. We walk together, we fly together,
Yes.
and we
Uh,
empower each other.
so, Lisa, just be mindful of the time. Is that what's your next key projects? I know you've been working quite a bit on the books and your advocacy, but is there anything in the pipeline that you would like to tell the audience about or make them aware about? Something maybe, I don't know when, but
I mean, I have a lot of things happening. I know recently I became a CASA advocate. So that's a court-appointed special advocate for children. So that is me stepping into the courtroom, abdicating for that child that I'm working with and being a voice for them. So that's another level of being a voice for the voiceless, children that need that support. And it's an interesting, experience, but it's another thing that I've always had in the back of my mind that I would do one day. And I'm loving the fact that I can step up into that role. So that is something that's new on my plate. But I'm also thinking about writing my third book. And
nice.
yes, so thinking about writing about the healing journey, my healing journey, and all of the things I've experienced along the way, and my reflections looking back at different stages of my life. So that is in the wheelhouse, thinking about getting a new book going and with all the other stuff that I'm doing. And I also have a children's series that's been sitting for a long time that I'd love to get officially published. And this is, called Phoebe and Valentine's Great Adventures. And it's about my granddaughter, Phoebe, who is being raised by her grandparents and teaching children about family units. They're all unique and special. Not all children are raised by their biological parents, and it can be stressful to think about, seeing other kids being raised in such a way, but they're not. And when Phoebe came to us at a young age, because we're raising our grandchildren, I saw her struggles, and that encouraged me to write these stories. So they're really awesome stories, and that is something that I want to have officially published. So that will be coming down the road as well. Phoebe and Valentine need to be out there because these stories are so awesome and just touch your heart.
Uh, so, guys, also, as I mentioned, Lisa's information website, lisazarcone.com.
.net.
Sorry, not .net, lisazarcone.net. There you get to read about her blogs. I'm an avid reader of her blogs and her poems, and just to know where she is. So you have already heard that her books are coming out. both a children's series as well as another book, and she's an advocate for caring for others, juggling many roles. And Lisa, thank you so very, very much. Is there anything that you would like to say as a parting thought before we can conclude our conversation?
Parting thoughts. I just, like to say our world right now is in turmoil. And I'm not
Mhm.
going to get into the logistics of all the turmoil, but we all know that we are in turmoil. And we need to come together as community for healing, for unity, and to help one another. And the mental health piece is so important, but all of it, the child safety piece is important, but you have to put it all together as a whole. And if we can just step up and just be kind and caring to one another, extend a helping hand when we can, offer a smile, a hug, a little word of encouragement. All those little things are actually the big things that put us together and unifies us. And I'm hoping just to send that message of hope, faith. I always use my term, my phrase, embrace the journey, because we all have things in life that we should be embracing and need to be embracing. And just step forward with kindness, everyone, the best that you can, because life is hard, and we should have as much joy as possible.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you for your space and time. It has
Thank
been a beautiful journey in this conversation, knowing a little about you, knowing about what your future plans are, and of course, knowing the person that you are. Thank you, and best wishes.
Thank you, and you as well.